Well, let's go live to Washington now. The correspondent for The Australian, Adam Crichton, joins us. Adam, good to see you. Let's talk about this $3 trillion in debt here on Budget Day in Australia. I know you're missing us, Adam. That $1 trillion
Very
debt
much,
really
yeah.
pales in comparison to what you're facing there in the US.
Well, look, the similarities are that both governments spend far more than they raise in tax, but the deficit here, of course, is just enormous. It's about $1.5 trillion this year, and President Biden has penciled in $1.2 trillion next year, which is worth pointing out is the entire size of Australia's GDP. So that is how big is the gap, if you like, between the revenue and expenses of the US government. I mean, you were just talking about the proposed billionaires tax, which of course is getting a lot of attention. And the government says here that it would raise something like $360 billion over 10 years. But really, that's a very, very small amount in the scheme of things in the US when you have a deficit that is more than $1 trillion every single year. And that new tax is money raised over 10 years. So really, it's a political tax. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to enforce because, as Annalise was suggesting, effectively, the government is going to be forcing people to sell assets before they've actually made any profit on them. And of course, that's going to run into a lot of administrative difficulties.
Yeah, there's a few problems economically in the US, isn't it? Your inflation is much higher than Australia. There's cost of living issues there as well. And it doesn't seem like there's many fiscal levers to pull on.
Yeah, look, it's a good point. I mean, one of the things when I was doing budget lockup is we'd always look back in Canberra at what the economic assumptions were of the government. And so we'd look at inflation and GDP growth and criticise them to see how realistically they were. But the budget here is completely insane. So the federal government has assumed here that the rate of inflation is going to fall to 2.3% next year from 7.9% right now. And it's going to stay at 2.3% for every year after that. So that's obviously completely
what's
crazy.
That based on?
And
how have they done that?
Well, it's just based on politics, basically. It's a political document, just like the Australian budget is, but it's even more of a political document here because it's essentially a negotiation, the starting point of a negotiation, if you like, between the White House and the Congress, which ultimately controls the purse strings.
Yeah, and the midterms are coming up. Joe Biden, not just in an economic sense, has had a few missteps, also a few missteps on the world stage too.
Yeah, look, that's right. I mean, there was a big poll that came out recently here that showed the president's popularity had fallen to 40% was the approval rating. And indeed, I was surprised, actually. I thought that he might have got some sort of war bounce, if you like, as most leaders around the world do whenever their nation's involved in some sort of war. And of course, the US is leading global efforts to support Ukraine. But far from a bounce, the approval rating fell to 40%, according to the NBC, which was the lowest level for the US president so far, and indeed his unpopularity level, if you like, the opposite. The dissatisfaction rose to 55%, the highest so far. And I think more worrying for the White House here is that most Americans blame the White House or President Biden on the high rate of inflation. They don't blame Russia and they don't blame the COVID-19 pandemic. They blame the policies of the White House, which, I mean, to some extent, I feel a little bit sorry for the president because, I mean, he's inherited this extraordinary increase in the money supply, which happened under President Trump as well. And of course, that's the Federal Reserve's, under the Federal Reserve's control, not the White House. But of course, he's going to have to live with the political consequences of that. And as you say, the midterms coming up in November, extremely critical. The Democrats have a wafer-thin majorities in both houses, and it's looking more and more likely that they'll lose both houses.
Question without notice, Adam. The Oscars, that slap reverberating right around the world. Team Will Smith, Team Chris Rock. Where do you sit?
Look, I mean, I don't know, probably Team Will Smith. I mean, I like a bit of passion, and I think it's probably been great for the Oscars ratings. I mean, I think no one was seriously injured, but I was just shocked at the focus of the media on the Will Smith story when China locked down 26 million people, potentially for weeks. It's just a reminder of the priorities that I guess that the general public has and the media reflects.
Yeah. I guess so. And it also kind of reminds us how out of touch Hollywood is as well, and how difficult it is to be a comedian these days. I mean, your jokes are not funny,
yes.
you get
yes.
slapped.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. It was just a joke after all. I think there's some attention seeking in this, but I mean, he's not a young man anymore. Will Smith. He's like 53, and he's kind of carrying on like a 25-year-old. So anyway,
Yeah. Chris Rock's not a young man either, despite appearances. He looks incredible. But anyway, we'll leave it there, Adam. Good to talk to you. We'll speak to you soon.
okay. Yes, Laura. Thank you. Good to speak.
Adam Crichton loves it when I ask him a question without notice, particularly on the Oscars.